Okay, let me use the presentation as an example to bring up some points that I think could be interesting. I can see the presentation has a very, very elaborate flow, okay, in terms of understanding where it's taking the customer in terms of, or the investor in terms of, hey, that's the logic, this is growth here, this is the best solution. Just a personal point on that is that I would say it works quite well in this market, giving a map to people to kind of reference what's the whole kind of picture. And actually, you have a slide that already kind of represents this. But I would say it could be a little bit more focused on why is it ideal for you. This is just a random example, okay? But here you had the scouting methods, and then kind of mapping out, hey, this is why a corporate, obviously everything, we know how the slides work. It's all going to be great on the side that we're proposing. But I think it gives customers an allocation or an understanding of why this is. And you can refer to the example saying, hey, this is the problem with this. This is the, because that really helps, I think, because it's a really good flow of slides, but I think it's missing kind of that summary. Or for example, I think that a point that I'll bring up afterwards is the optionality to add this, because I think that's very in tune with the risk-averse nature of a lot of companies and a lot of corporate groups here, that they really don't, and that optionality can play quite well. Okay, and this can be added here, but the key factor is depending if you're talking about activities or depending if you're talking about investment options, kind of bring up that in a kind of more educational, more map kind of approach. I think it's actually quite people appreciate that in this market, and I think in that sense it could be quite useful. Okay. In addition to that, I think that bringing up the flow, I do like quite a bit this slide here about the history and all that. I'm not, obviously, apologies. I'm not here to say if this is right or not, but it looks a little bit overloaded in that sense. Or here, but I really like this one, and I think this one could be especially interesting for Asian customers once we bring up an example that they can refer to. It happens a lot. This is a market that kind of does a lot of mimicking or mirroring of what they is seen in, especially in the US, but sometimes in Europe too, saying, oh, this worked here. This lowers the uncertainty. It lowers the risk that we're taking. And if this companies, if you can find really good examples saying, hey, actually, similar to your company, there's a telco of medium-sized telco in Czech Republic or in the Eastern Europe or whatever example, I think this is really powerful. This in any engagements at a sales level, product level, investment level, the moment there's a reference to saying, hey, this other player has done it and we can learn and we can replicate, this reduces uncertainty quite strongly. Then when we go to the next level, here, the slides are very understandable, saying, hey, it's the US where the power and the VC relationships in the US are absolutely key. This, again, I refer again to this slide, some version of this slide, because I think this is quite powerful. In Asia, relationships are determining in a lot of the focus that a lot of the business done with relationships. I've struggled with companies that were saying, well, but it all has to be relationship based. And I'm saying, you can't scale relationship based, especially consumer products or at large B2B businesses. But there's still the mentality that relationships are everything. So I think this slide, what it gives you the impression is, hey, it's really easy. It's a playground. It's a playground for relationships that it's impossible to replicate in Asia because you're too far. And we have the relationships. I don't know if this is the exact slide, and I just like the map part of it, of seeing that everything is happening here, and to refer to that as an example. Finally, when we're looking at kind of the proposal, makes a lot of sense. It's very detailed, very complete. I would say timelines kind of create a reduction in that uncertainty that customers or investors tend to feel in this region. And okay, there's a timeline. And related to that, what could work, and I'm not saying, because I know you're already at proposal, you already showed this to the where you're preparing to the companies you're preparing the proposal for. But what could be interesting is always have the backup option of a POC, semi-POC kind of version of how do you test this. Because, as mentioned, reducing risk is absolutely essential, from, hey, mapping out and educating, saying, hey, this is why this option is the best. This is giving a concrete examples that they can refer. So this is why it would work very similarly to you. This is why we can make it work, and we have all these relationships. And addition to that, hey, if you want a lower version, a lower risk, I wouldn't bring that up immediately. I know, because that you're just lowering your own value proposition, and you're giving them an easy way out. But it could be a very interesting way to have a secondary option, saying, hey, okay, I see that there's a bit of resistance. Why don't we do this? We have a smaller version of this, so you can test the ground. I think that has proven to work quite well, because once they get their hands dirty, it's much easier to scale it. And then, as I mentioned, a general theme that I would say that I would like to reinforce again with that kind of cultural framework of, hey, I'm not sure, hey, I want to make sure my options are open, is ensuring then the understanding of this is CVC is the best option, gives you the best optionality. It's a little bit what we're seeing here, a little bit here in this slide. Don't pay much attention. I just fill it up a little bit fast, just as an example, but saying, hey, if you want to increase your low capital, maximize control, and especially give you really high optionality. If things go well, you can take the upside. If things don't go well, low investment. This is the dream. This is why options work very well in investment and in stock investing. So I think that could be four points to bring up. Okay, the educational, the mapping part, very concrete examples that refer to the customers, and kind of showing them, hey, this is what works. Strengthening the part where they understand the relationships that you have in Silicon Valley. And then ideally a timeline link to, depending on the stage of the discussions, and later in the discussions always, but having a POC option ready. If you see that they're slowing down, they're like, well, we'll get back to you, we're not really sure. Because that's the problem. It's always a 0 or 1. And sometimes we need to create a 0.3, a 0.5 option where they're like, okay, I'll dip my toes. And they also want the optionality on working with you. And I think that's an interesting way to focus on that. I hope this is helpful, and we can talk anytime about this.